when single mother Rebecca Morgan purchased a weathered 1930s dairy barn in rural Montana for $34,500, her desperate gamble to rebuild a life after losing her architectural firm in Chicago to a devastating lawsuit. She never imagined that the peculiar set of blueprints hidden behind a false wall would be identified as belonging to a classified Cold War-era intelligence facility, trigger an immediate visit from the CIA director himself, expose a dormant Russian intelligence operation that had been gathering US military secrets for decades, reveal that her grandfather had been one of the original architects who designed secure facilities for the early CIA, and transform her from a bankrupt designer to a crucial consultant in neutralizing what intelligence officials called the most significant counterintelligence vulnerability on American soil in 50 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca Morgan pressed her forehead against the steering wheel of her decade-old Honda Pilot, willing herself not to cry as her GPS announced she had reached her destination. Her 10-year-old daughter, Emma, was asleep in the back seat, surrounded by stuffed animals and whatever else they'd managed to fit into the vehicle when they'd left Chicago 3 days earlier. "This can't be it," Rebecca whispered, finally looking up at what was supposed to be their new home. The Willow Creek barn stood, or rather leaned, at the end of a gravel driveway, partially reclaimed by tall prairie grasses. The massive structure, with its weathered red paint, sagging roofline, and partially collapsed silo, had once been the centerpiece of a prosperous dairy farm. Now it stood abandoned, a testament to changing agricultural economies and rural exodus. The online listing had used words like rustic charm and conversion potential. It should have said last resort for the desperate. And desperate was exactly what Rebecca was. At 42, with a master's degree in architectural design and a once promising career creating innovative urban living spaces, she had built Horizon Designs into a respected Chicago firm with 15 employees. Then came the lawsuit, a wealthy client, claiming structural defects in a multi-million-dollar renovation. The suit was baseless, as engineering reports later proved, but the legal fees had drained her company's reserves before the case was dismissed. By then, the damage was done. Contracts cancelled, reputation tarnished, the firm collapsed, taking Rebecca's savings and downtown condo with it. The final blow had come when Emma's private school informed Rebecca that without tuition payment, her daughter couldn't return for fall semester. That's when she'd found the listing for Willow Creek Barn, a 6,000-square-foot former dairy barn with attached living quarters on 5 acres in Paradise Valley, Montana, all for just $34,500. A price so low it seemed impossible until the photos made clear why. The living quarters were barely habitable, the barn itself needed structural work, and the property had been on the market for years with no takers. But it was something they would own outright, with no mortgage. And with Rebecca's remaining funds, just over $17,000, she believed her architectural experience could transform it into a comfortable home, maybe even with studio space where she could rebuild her design practice in a region with less competition. "Mom, are we there?" Emma's sleepy voice came from the back seat as she rubbed her eyes, her blonde curls a tangled mess after hours in the car. "We're home, sweetheart," Rebecca said, trying to infuse the word home with an enthusiasm she didn't feel. "It needs some work, but it's all ours." Emma's eyes widened as she took in the dilapidated structure. "It looks like it's going to fall down." Rebecca laughed despite herself. "That's just because you're used to city buildings. Barns are built to last. This one's been standing for almost 100 years. She silently hoped it would remain standing through whatever Montana winter had in store for them. "Can we go inside?" Emma asked, her initial wariness giving way to curiosity. "Let's do it," Adventure awaits, right? The key stuck in the lock, requiring Rebecca to jiggle it while pushing against the warped door with her shoulder. When it finally gave way, the musty smell of abandonment greeted them. Dust, old hay, and something deeper, like paper left too long in a damp attic. The former living quarters consisted of what had once been the farm manager's residence, a small kitchen, a cramped living area, one bedroom, and a bathroom with fixtures dating to the 1970s. It was Spartan, but mercifully intact. The inspection report had confirmed the plumbing worked, the well tested clean, and the electrical had been updated sometime in the early 2000s. Small mercies that made this desperate gamble slightly less terrifying. "Can I see the big barn part?" Emma asked, bouncing with the resilient enthusiasm only children seem capable of maintaining in dire circumstances. "Sure, but stay close to me. There might be weak spots in the floor." The main barn space was cavernous, soaring ceilings with exposed beams, massive sliding doors at either end, and remnants of the dairy operation still visible in the form of old stanchions where cows had once stood for milking. Light filtered through dirty windows and gaps in the siding, creating ethereal beams in the dusty air. To Rebecca's trained eye, the structure was in better shape than she'd feared. The foundation appeared solid, the main support beams intact. With her expertise, this space could become something extraordinary. An open-concept living area, perhaps. Or the studio she'd always dreamed of. "It's like a castle," Emma declared, her voice echoing in the vast space. "A very rustic castle," Rebecca replied, but she found herself smiling. Her daughter wasn't wrong. There was a certain majesty to these old agricultural cathedrals, built with craftsmanship rarely seen in modern construction. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As they explored further, Rebecca's designer's mind catalogued possibilities and challenges. The hayloft could become Emma's bedroom with a view of the mountains. The former milkroom might make a cozy office. The massive sliding doors could be replaced with walls of glass to capture the stunning Montana landscape visible through the gaps. It was while examining one of the interior walls that Rebecca noticed something odd. A section that didn't quite match the rest. While most of the barn featured vertical wooden siding, this 10-foot section had horizontal planking. To an untrained eye, it might have appeared as just another farm repair, but Rebecca's architectural background flagged it immediately as incongruous with the original design. "What's wrong with that wall?" she muttered, approaching for a closer look. The horizontal boards were newer than the surrounding structure, perhaps dating to the 1960s rather than the 1930s. Running her hand along the seam where it met the original wall, Rebecca felt a slight draft. Air movement where there shouldn't be any. "Emma, can you grab my toolbox from the car, the small one in the back seat?" While Emma ran to fetch the tools, Rebecca continued examining the wall. Tapping it produced a distinctly hollow sound compared to the solid thunk of the true structural walls. When Emma returned with the toolbox, Rebecca selected a pry bar and carefully worked it into the seam at the edge of the suspicious section. With a creak of protesting nails, one of the horizontal boards came loose, revealing a dark space behind. Encouraged, Rebecca removed several more boards, creating an opening large enough to shine her phone's flashlight through. "It's a room," she whispered, stunned. "There's a hidden room behind this wall." "Cool," Emma exclaimed, trying to peer around her mother. "Like in mystery books." The concealed space was roughly 8 by 10 feet, windowless and apparently sealed off from the rest of the barn for decades. Rebecca removed enough boards to create an opening they could step through. Inside, they found what appeared to be a small office space. A metal desk sat against one wall, its surface covered with dust. A filing cabinet stood in one corner. Most Surprisingly, the walls were lined with what looked like thin metal sheeting painted over to resemble wood. "What is this place, Mom?" Emma asked, her voice hushed in the stillness of the hidden room. "I'm not sure," Rebecca replied, moving toward the desk. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to hide it, though." The desk drawers were locked, but the cheap mechanism yielded easily to Rebecca's pry bar. Inside the center drawer lay a leather portfolio, its surface cracked with age. With careful hands, she opened it to reveal a set of architectural blueprints, detailed technical drawings, unlike anything she'd seen before. The plans appeared to be for an underground facility of some kind, with notations in both English and what looked like technical code. The title block in the corner had been partially obscured by a red stamp reading "Classified Umbra" with a series of numbers underneath. "These are government drawings," Rebecca said, her professional experience immediately recognizing the format used for sensitive federal projects. "Military or intelligence, based on the classification stamp." "Are they for this barn?" Emma asked. "No, something much bigger and much more secretive." Rebecca continued examining the drawings, recognizing certain design elements used in hardened facilities, the kind built to withstand attacks or surveillance. As an architect, she'd studied historical examples in graduate school, but had never seen actual classified plans. Beneath the blueprints lay a leather-bound journal. Opening it revealed meticulous handwritten notes dated 1962-1964, signed J. H. Morgan. The name made Rebecca freeze. "Morgan, that was Grandpa Jack's name, James Henry Morgan," she whispered. "Your grandpa?" Emma asked. "Did he live here?" "No, he was an architect in Washington, D.C. I never knew him well. He died when I was very young. Mom said he designed government buildings, but she never talked about his work much." Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she turned the journal pages, finding detailed notes about construction techniques for secure facilities, references to acoustic isolation methods, and counter-surveillance measures. One entry, particularly, caught her attention. March 15, 1963, completed review of Montana site plans. Remote location ideal for echo facility requirements. Recommended additional screening measures in eastern wall access point. Thermal imaging technology advancing rapidly. Standard countermeasures may be insufficient within decade. Submitted alternative shielding proposal to Colhayes. "Mom, look," Emma said, pointing to the wall behind the desk. "There's something there." Rebecca raised her flashlight to reveal what appeared to be a built-in safe, its door blending almost seamlessly with the metal wall covering. Unlike the desk, this was no ordinary office furniture, but a sophisticated security installation. "We should probably stop touching things," Rebecca said suddenly, a sense of unease settling over her. Government blueprints stamped "classified," a hidden room with metal-lined walls, a journal from her grandfather mentioning secure facilities. This was far beyond the usual barn renovation surprise of bad wiring or pest damage. As they exited the hidden room, Rebecca's phone, which had been struggling to find signal since their arrival, suddenly chimed with an incoming call. The display showed "unknown number." With hesitation, she answered, "Hello? Ms. Rebecca Morgan?" The male voice was crisp, professional. "Yes, that's me. This is Special Agent Thomas Keller with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been notified of a potential security concern at your location. I need to confirm, have you recently discovered a concealed space in the property you've just purchased?" Rebecca's blood ran cold. How could they possibly know? They'd only discovered the room minutes ago. Yes," she stammered. "How did you—" "Ms. Morgan, I need you to secure that space and not remove anything from it. A team will arrive at your location shortly. Please remain on the premises." "Wait, what's going on? What is this place?" Rebecca demanded, her initial shock giving way to maternal concern. I have my daughter with me. Should we be worried?" There was a slight pause. "No, Miss Morgan, you're not in any danger, but the materials you've discovered may be sensitive. Given your background in architecture and your familial connection to James Morgan, we believe you may have unintentionally acquired a property with historical intelligence significance." "My grandfather," Rebecca breathed. "This was his project?" "That's part of what we need to determine. Our team will arrive within the hour. In the meantime, please refrain from discussing this discovery with anyone." After the call ended, Rebecca stood in stunned silence, trying to process this bewildering turn of events. Their new beginning, already tenuous, had just become far more complicated. "Is something wrong?" Emma asked, sensing her mother's tension. Rebecca managed a reassuring smile. "No, sweetie. Some people are coming to look at what we found. Apparently it might be historically important. Like museum important or secret important?" "Maybe a bit of both," Rebecca admitted, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Let's go back to the car and get some snacks while we wait." As they walked outside, Rebecca noticed something she'd missed in her earlier distress. The spectacular view of the Paradise Valley spread before them, the Absaroka Mountains rising majestically in the distance, painted in the amber light of late afternoon. Whatever complications this hidden room might bring, the beauty of this place remained undeniable. Within 45 minutes, the quiet rural property transformed into a scene of controlled urgency. 3 black SUVs arrived, disgorging a team of agents in plain clothes who immediately established a perimeter around the barn. Equipment cases were efficiently unloaded, and a secure communications setup appeared with remarkable speed. A man who identified himself as Assistant Director Jensen of the FBI approached Rebecca, who stood protectively close to Emma near their Honda. "Ms. Morgan, thank you for your cooperation. We'll need to examine the concealed space you discovered. This is a matter of historical intelligence security." "My grandfather," Rebecca said. "His journal is in there. He was involved in this, wasn't he?" Jensen's expression remained professional, but softened slightly. James Morgan was a significant government contractor in the early 1960s. His architectural expertise was instrumental in certain sensitive projects during a critical period of the Cold War. Beyond that, I'm not authorized to share details at this time. As the agents worked in the barn, a 4th vehicle arrived, a helicopter touching down in the open field adjacent to the property. Rebecca watched in disbelief as a distinguished-looking man in his 60s emerged, accompanied by 2 serious-looking individuals who screened his approach to the barn. "Who's that?" Emma whispered. "I have no idea," Rebecca replied, but something about the deferential body language of the FBI agents suggested someone of considerable authority had just arrived. Assistant Director Jensen approached again, his manner notably more formal. "Ms. Morgan, Director Harper would like to speak with you privately. This is unusual. The director rarely makes field visits." "Director Harper of the FBI?" Rebecca asked, confused by the escalation in official presence. Jensen cleared his throat. "No, Ms. Morgan. Director Harper is the current director of the Central Intelligence Agency." Rebecca felt her world tilt slightly. The CIA director had just landed at her dilapidated barn in Montana, mere hours after she'd discovered a hidden room. What had she stumbled into? "My daughter," she began. "One of our agents is a mother herself. She'd be happy to show Emma our communications equipment while you speak with the director. I assure you, she'll remain within your sight at all times." After ensuring Emma was comfortably settled with Agent Meredith Davis, who was indeed demonstrating some impressively high-tech communication devices, Rebecca was escorted to what had once been the farm manager's small living room. Inside waited the man from the helicopter, his shrewd eyes assessing her with unconcealed interest. "Ms. Morgan," he said, extending his hand. "Richard Harper, thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "I'm not sure I had much choice," Rebecca replied, shaking his hand nonetheless. A slight smile crossed his face. "Fair enough. Please, sit down." As they both took seats at the small kitchen table, an incongruous setting for meeting the head of America's Foreign Intelligence Service, Harper studied her face. "You have a remarkable resemblance to your grandfather," he said, surprising her. "I never had the privilege of meeting James Morgan myself, but his photograph has been in our headquarters' historical collection for decades." "You have my grandfather's picture at CIA headquarters?" Rebecca asked incredulously. "Along with other key contributors to our facilities and capabilities during the Cold War." James Morgan wasn't CIA. He was a contracted architect, but his contributions to secure facility design were invaluable. Harper leaned forward, his manner becoming more direct. "Ms. Morgan, what you've discovered here isn't just a quirky architectural feature or a historical footnote. This property sits atop what was once designated Echo Site, a critical communications relay facility designed to maintain government continuity during a potential nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. A nuclear bunker under my barn?" The absurdity almost made Rebecca laugh, despite the gravity of Harper's expression. "Not exactly. Echo Site was a signal intelligence facility designed to remain operational even after a first strike. It was part of a network of communication points strategically positioned across the country, disguised as ordinary agricultural or industrial buildings. Your grandfather was the lead architect on several of these facilities, including this one. But why is the CIA director personally visiting a decommissioned Cold War facility?" Rebecca pressed. "Surely this is a historical curiosity, not a current security concern." Harper's expression grew somber. "Under normal circumstances, you'd be correct. These facilities were decommissioned decades ago, their sensitive equipment removed, their purposes obsolete in the age of satellite communications and the Internet." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "However, the blueprints you discovered aren't just for this facility. Based on what my team has already assessed, they appear to contain design specifications for the entire Echo network, including facilities that remain classified to this day. Some of these installations were later repurposed for current intelligence operations." Rebecca's architectural mind quickly grasped the implication. So, having the complete network blueprint would be a serious security vulnerability. Precisely. In the wrong hands, these documents could compromise ongoing operations and potentially endanger personnel. But why were they hidden here, and why wasn't this room discovered when the facility was decommissioned? Harper smiled thinly. "That's what makes this particularly interesting, Ms. Morgan. According to our records, your grandfather officially turned over all classified materials related to Project Echo in 1965. There was no indication he retained copies, especially not design specifications for the entire network. Yet he hid them here, in rural Montana, in a property that has no connection to our family that I know of," Rebecca mused. "It doesn't make sense." "That's part of what we need to determine," Harper said. "The fact that these materials surfaced now when certain foreign intelligence services are actively seeking information on our Cold War infrastructure is concerning." Rebecca's eyes widened. "You think this was deliberate? That I was somehow meant to find these documents?" "I think it's a remarkable coincidence that an architect with a direct familial connection to James Morgan purchased this specific property at this particular time, especially considering your professional training would allow you to recognize the architectural anomalies that led to discovering the hidden room. The implication hung in the air between them. Either an extraordinary coincidence had occurred, or Rebecca had been manipulated into this discovery by unknown forces. "I bought this place because it was cheap, and I'm broke," Rebecca stated flatly. "My design firm went under after a frivolous lawsuit. This was literally the only property I could afford that had potential for renovation." "And how did you find the listing?" Harper asked quietly. Rebecca opened her mouth to reply, then stopped, thinking back. It was an email, a specialized listing service for architectural renovation opportunities. I've been subscribed for years, but this was the first time they'd featured something in Montana. "Would you happen to remember the name of this service?" "Adaptive reuse opportunities," Rebecca said slowly, a chill running through her as she recognized how easily she might have been targeted. "But that doesn't mean—" "We'll look into it," Harper said neutrally. "In the meantime, we need to secure these materials and thoroughly examine this facility." "What about my daughter and me? This is supposed to be our home." Harper studied her for a moment. "What were your renovation plans for this property, Ms. Morgan?" The question seemed tangential, but Rebecca answered professionally. "Convert the main barn space into a combined living area and architectural studio. The location is remote enough to keep costs low while I rebuild my practice, but close enough to Bozeman and Livingston for potential clients. Your professional background is primarily in adaptive reuse of historical structures, correct?" "Yes," Rebecca confirmed, wondering where this was heading. "I specialize in repurposing historic buildings for modern use while preserving their architectural integrity." Harper nodded thoughtfully. "Ms. Morgan, I'd like to propose an arrangement that might be mutually beneficial. The government needs to thoroughly assess this facility and determine why your grandfather concealed these materials here. You need a home and a fresh start for your career." He leaned forward. "What if we contracted you to oversee the architectural aspects of this assessment? Your expertise in historic structures would provide legitimate cover for the security work needed, and your connection to James Morgan might help us understand his motivations. In return, we'd provide funding that would allow you to renovate the property to your specifications once the security assessment is complete." Rebecca blinked in surprise. "You want to hire me to help investigate a Cold War intelligence facility that my grandfather apparently helped hide? Your architectural knowledge, combined with your genetic connection to James Morgan, creates a unique skill set for this particular situation," Harper said pragmatically. "And frankly, we need to keep this quiet. Having the property owner cooperating willingly is far preferable to alternatives that might attract attention." The unspoken message was clear. This was going to happen with or without her cooperation, but her willing participation would make things considerably easier for everyone involved. Rebecca thought of Emma, of their precarious financial situation, of the massive renovation challenges the barn presented even without mysterious Cold War complications. Government funding would make the difference between scraping by and creating the home and studio she had envisioned. "If I agree, what happens next?" she asked cautiously. "A small team would remain on site, disguised as a renovation crew. You would continue with your planned conversion of the property with certain modifications to accommodate our security requirements. Your role would be twofold: legitimate architectural work on the barn renovation and consultation on technical aspects of the original facility design based on your professional expertise. And my grandfather's involvement. Would I learn why he hid these documents?" Something flickered in Harper's expression, a hint that there was more to this situation than he was sharing. "That's part of what we hope to discover, Ms. Morgan. James Morgan was considered above reproach, a patriot who contributed significantly to national security during a perilous time in American history. Finding these concealed documents raises questions we never expected to ask. Rebecca glanced through the window to where Emma was now showing Agent Davis her collection of small stuffed animals, apparently having decided that a CIA agent made an excellent audience for her treasures. "We can stay in the property while this investigation proceeds," she confirmed. "With appropriate security measures, yes, we'll expedite the essential renovations to make the living quarters comfortable immediately." It was a devil's bargain in some ways, trading privacy for security and financial support. But what choice did she really have? Her funds would barely cover basic improvements to make the place habitable through winter. "I want everything in writing," Rebecca said firmly, her business experience asserting itself. "Clear parameters about what areas of the property remain under my control, specific timelines, and guarantees about the renovation funding." Harper nodded, seeming almost pleased by her assertiveness. "My legal team will draft an agreement. In the meantime, we'll arrange temporary accommodations for you and your daughter in Livingston while the initial security sweep is completed." As they stood to conclude their strange negotiation, Harper paused. "One more thing, Ms. Morgan. You mentioned your business failed following a lawsuit. Would the plaintiff happen to have been Victor Krasny of Summit Investments?" Rebecca stared, in shock. "How could you possibly know that?" "Mr. Krasny has certain associations that have placed him on our watch list for some time. The fact that he targeted your firm specifically shortly before you happened to purchase this particular property, let's just say it adds another dimension to our concerns." With that cryptic statement, Harper excused himself, leaving Rebecca to process the staggering implications. Her financial ruin, which had seemed like terrible luck, might have been deliberately engineered to drive her toward this remote Montana property and its Cold War secrets. As she rejoined Emma, who was now proudly wearing an FBI baseball cap gifted by Agent Davis, Rebecca gazed at the weathered barn with new eyes. What had begun as a desperate last resort, a Hail Mary attempt to rebuild their lives, had somehow entangled them in what appeared to be an active intelligence operation. The CIA director himself had flown in within hours of her discovery. Whatever lay beneath the surface of Willow Creek Barn, it clearly remained significant to national security. Decades after the Cold War had ended, and somehow her grandfather, a man she barely remembered, stood at the center of the mystery. "Mom, can we keep staying here even with all these agents around?" Emma asked, seemingly unfazed by the extraordinary circumstances. Rebecca hugged her daughter close. "Yes, sweetie. In fact, they're going to help us fix up the barn faster than we could have done ourselves." "Cool. Agent Meredith said she has a daughter my age. Maybe she can visit sometime." As the sun set over the Montana mountains, casting long shadows across their accidental intelligence facility, Rebecca wondered what other secrets waited to be uncovered behind the weathered walls of Willow Creek Barn, and what role her grandfather had intended for her to play in this decades-old mystery. The journey that had begun in desperation had taken a turn she could never have anticipated. But as Rebecca watched Emma chatting animatedly with Agent Davis about the barn renovation plans, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Whatever complications came with this bizarre situation, it offered a path forward when all other doors had closed. Sometimes, she reflected, the most unexpected detours led to destinations you never knew you were seeking. And perhaps, in some strange way, her grandfather had been guiding her here all along. The morning after the CIA director's unexpected visit, Rebecca woke in a luxurious hotel suite in Livingston, accommodations far beyond what she could have afforded on her dwindling savings. Emma was still asleep in the adjoining room, exhausted From the previous day's excitement and their impromptu relocation, Rebecca sipped coffee by the window, watching the Montana sunrise paint the mountains gold while trying to process the bewildering turn their lives had taken. Just 48 hours ago, they'd been heading toward a desperate new beginning in a dilapidated barn. Now they were entangled in what appeared to be an active intelligence operation connected to her grandfather's Cold War past. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of Agent Meredith Davis, who had appointed herself as their unofficial liaison. The young FBI agent brought fresh pastries and an update on the situation at Willow Creek Barn. "The initial security sweep is complete," she reported. "Director Harper has authorized your return to the property today. A team disguised as renovation contractors has already begun work on the living quarters to make them immediately habitable." "That was fast," Rebecca remarked, surprised by the efficiency. "When the CIA director takes personal interest in an operation, bureaucratic hurdles tend to disappear," Meredith replied with a slight smile. "A legal team will meet us at the property with your contract. Director Harper was impressed by your insistence on clear terms." "I've learned the hard way about proceeding without proper agreements," Rebecca said, thinking of the lawsuit that had destroyed her firm. "What have they found so far?" Meredith's expression grew more measured. "I'm not cleared to share operational details, but I can tell you they've confirmed the presence of a sealed access point to underground portions of the facility. Your discovery was just the tip of the iceberg." Rebecca felt a strange mixture of vindication and unease. Her architect's instinct about the hidden room had been correct, but the implications were growing more complex by the hour. "What about my grandfather's journal and the blueprints?" "Those have been temporarily transferred to a secure facility for analysis. You'll be granted supervised access as part of your consulting role." When they returned to Willow Creek Barn later that morning, Rebecca barely recognized the approach to the property. The overgrown driveway had been cleared and graveled. A professional-looking sign reading Morgan Restoration Project stood near the entrance. Half a dozen vehicles were parked outside, and the sounds of construction echoed from within. "They've been busy?" Rebecca murmured as they pulled up. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. The small living quarters had undergone an astonishing overnight renovation. New drywall, fresh paint, updated fixtures, and even new furniture had appeared as if by magic. What had yesterday been a barely habitable space now looked like a comfortable, if compact, apartment. "Wow!" Emma exclaimed, running to explore the bedroom that had been outfitted with a new bed, desk, and bookshelf. "Mom, they even got me purple sheets. How did they know I like purple?" Rebecca exchanged glances with Meredith, who shrugged. "Intelligence agencies are observant by nature." The main barn space was now a hive of activity. Men and women in construction gear moved with purpose. But Rebecca's trained eye noticed their movements had the disciplined precision not typically found on renovation sites. These were agents with construction skills, not contractors with security clearance. A distinguished woman in her 60s approached, hand extended. "Ms. Morgan, I'm Catherine Reynolds, legal counsel for the Special Projects Division. I have the agreement Director Harper mentioned." Over the next hour, Rebecca reviewed a document that was part employment contract, part security agreement, and part renovation plan. The terms were surprisingly favorable: substantial compensation for her consultation role, generous funding for the barn conversion, and clear parameters about which areas remained under her control versus government. "Access. This is remarkably straightforward," Rebecca noted, her business experience making her suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. Reynolds smiled thinly. "Director Harper emphasized the importance of your willing cooperation. We find honesty works better than obfuscation in such circumstances." After signing the agreement, Rebecca was introduced to the operations field director, Michael Brennan, a former architect who now worked for an unnamed government agency. His architectural background made him the perfect liaison between Rebecca's renovation plans and the security team's requirements. "We've established a cover story," Brennan explained as he walked Rebecca through the barn. "Officially, you've received grant funding from the Historical Rural Architecture Preservation Society, a real organization that does actually support such projects, and now has a sudden influx of anonymous donation money. This explains the construction crew and resources without raising local suspicions." "And what am I actually doing here, beyond renovating my new home?" Rebecca asked bluntly. "3 things," Brennan counted on his fingers. "First, legitimate architectural work, converting this barn into your home and studio. That part's real and beneficial to both parties. Second, consulting on technical aspects of the original facility based on your professional expertise. Third, and perhaps most important, helping us understand why your grandfather concealed these materials here and what connection, if any, exists to current security concerns." They paused near the hidden room, which had been expanded to reveal a metal door built into what had appeared to be solid foundation. "That leads to the actual Echo facility?" Rebecca asked. Brennan nodded. "A hardened communication bunker approximately 30 feet below ground. Small by modern standards, about 2,000 square feet of operational space, but remarkably sophisticated for its era. We're still assessing its condition." "When can I see it?" "Once the structural engineers confirm its stability. Abandoned underground facilities present safety concerns." As they continued the tour, Rebecca realized the operation maintained perfect complementarity with her own renovation goals. The security team focused on the hidden facility and its secrets, while simultaneously advancing the barn conversion at a pace she could never have managed alone. By mid-afternoon, Emma had been enrolled in the local school with transport arranged, additional furniture had been delivered, and Rebecca's architectural drafting equipment had been set up in a temporary studio space. The efficiency was almost unnerving. "This is like those home renovation shows where they transform a house in a week," Rebecca remarked to Meredith, who had remained as their primary contact, except with federal agents instead of TV personalities. "The comparison isn't entirely inaccurate," Meredith laughed, "though our budget comes from classified appropriations rather than advertising revenue." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, exhausted by the day's excitement, Brennan returned with a security-cleared tablet containing scanned copies of her grandfather's journal. "We can't release the originals yet, but Director Harper authorized this access. He thinks your personal connection might help identify relevant information we might miss." Left alone with the digital copies, Rebecca spent hours immersed in her grandfather's meticulous handwriting. The journal revealed a man she'd never had the chance to know, brilliant, detail-oriented, deeply patriotic, but also troubled by certain aspects of his classified work. Several entries particularly caught her attention. November 18th, 1963. Reviewed modifications to Echo network communications protocols. The redundancies seem excessive even for nuclear preparedness. Hayes insists the systems must operate independently even if multiple sites are compromised. Something about his insistence troubles me. What scenario is he truly preparing for? January 4th, 1964. Disturbing conversation with Petrov at embassy reception. His questions about rural infrastructure projects seemed too specific, especially regarding Montana power grid upgrades. Have mentioned concerns to Hayes, who dismissed them as routine diplomatic fishing. Not convinced. March 22nd, 1964. Hayes rejected enhanced security measures for Montana site despite my recommendations. Claims budget constraints but approved similar upgrades for Wyoming facility last month. pattern of decisions increasingly troubling. Have documented discrepancies as discussed with W. The most intriguing entry came near the end, September 8, 1964. Decision made. Cannot trust official channels. W concurs this requires extraordinary measures. Have prepared duplicate documentation with personal annotations. Montana location ideal, remote, unconnected to my official record. If discovered as intended, the physical evidence will speak for itself. God help us if it's ever needed. The entry was followed by a series of numbers and letters that appeared to be some kind of code. Rebecca studied it, wondering who W might be and what discovery had driven her grandfather to hide classified materials, an action that could have been considered treasonous under certain circumstances. The next morning, Rebecca met with Brennan and a security analyst named Dr. Eleanor Wright, a historian specializing in Cold War intelligence operations. She shared her observations from the journal, particularly the cryptic final entries. "Bu. It could refer to Walter Jenkins," Dr. Wright suggested. He was a senior counterintelligence official during that period who worked closely with the architects of sensitive facilities. There were concerns about Soviet penetration of certain defense projects in the early 1960s. "My grandfather seemed to believe Colonel Hayes was compromised," Rebecca observed. "Interesting theory," Brennan said carefully. Hayes was the military overseer for several classified construction projects, including the Echo network. After a distinguished career, he retired in 1972 and died of natural causes in 1985. No indication of compromise was ever officially documented. Yet my grandfather felt strongly enough about his suspicions to risk his career, possibly even charges of espionage, by hiding these materials, Rebecca pointed out. That's not the action of someone with casual concerns. "Which brings us to a key question," Dr. Wright said. "Why here? Why this specific location? And most importantly, why was the material positioned to be found rather than simply hidden away?" Rebecca considered this. He mentions the location was ideal because it was remote and unconnected to his official record, but there's something else. She scrolled through the journal entries again. Here, he specifically refers to the materials being discovered as intended, and that physical evidence will speak for itself. He was creating an insurance policy, Brennan concluded, documentation that would validate his concerns if something happened to him. "But nothing did happen to him," Rebecca said. "At least, nothing suspicious. My mother said he died of a heart attack in 1978, 14 years after hiding these documents." "Perhaps the threat he perceived never materialized," Dr. Wright suggested. "Or perhaps it took a different form than he anticipated." Later that day, Rebecca was finally permitted to enter the underground facility. After signing additional security waivers and donning protective gear, she descended a narrow stairway behind the metal door in the hidden room. The bunker below was like stepping into a Cold War time capsule. Banks of now obsolete communications, equipment lined the walls. Desks with bakelite telephones and mechanical teletypes stood frozen in time. A large map of the United States dominated one wall, with small lights embedded at various points, presumably the locations of other Echo facilities. "It's remarkable," Rebecca breathed, her architect's appreciation for specialized design overwhelming. Even the strangeness of the situation. The acoustic damping, the electromagnetic shielding, these were cutting-edge techniques for the 1960s. "Your grandfather's innovations," Brennan confirmed. "Many of these design elements became standard in secure facilities for decades afterward." While the security team catalogued equipment and searched for additional documents, Rebecca examined the structural elements of the bunker. Her grandfather's architectural brilliance was evident in every detail, from the efficient use of limited space to the ingenious ventilation system designed to function even if surface structures were destroyed. In the communication center, Rebecca noticed something odd about one of the equipment racks. Unlike the others, which were bolted directly to the floor, this one had a slight gap at its base. "This has been moved," she noted, pointing to scuff marks on the floor. "Recently, I'd guess, based on the dust pattern." Brennan immediately called over a security technician who carefully pulled the rack further from the wall. Behind it, a small compartment had been cut into the concrete, containing a metal box. "It appears you have your grandfather's eye for detail," Brennan said, as the box was carefully extracted and placed on a nearby desk. The locked container yielded to specialized tools, revealing another set of documents, these even more sensitive than those found in the hidden room. They detailed what appeared to be evidence of security compromises at several ECHO facilities, with Colonel Hayes's signature on authorization forms that diverted equipment and technical specifications to projects not listed in official records. Most damning was a microfilm containing photographs of Hayes meeting with a known Soviet diplomat outside official channels, along with intercepted communications suggesting information about the ECHO network had been passed to Moscow. "This is why my grandfather created his insurance policy," Rebecca said quietly. "He had proof of a Soviet asset operating at the highest levels of a critical defense project, but nowhere to safely report it. The question remains, why didn't he come forward after securing this evidence?" Dr. Wright wondered. The answer came later that evening when Director Harper himself returned to Willow Creek Barn after reviewing the newly discovered materials. He met with Rebecca in what was rapidly becoming her actual architectural studio as the renovation progressed. At remarkable speed, "Your grandfather was placed under counterintelligence surveillance after raising his concerns about Hayes," Harper explained, his expression grave. "An unfortunate coincidence of timing made him appear potentially compromised." "They suspected him instead of Hayes," Rebecca realized. Harper nodded. "The very month your grandfather began documenting his concerns, a Soviet defector reported that a high-level American architect with access to defense projects had been recruited by Moscow. The description was deliberately vague, standard Soviet. Disinformation meant to trigger internal investigations that disrupted operations. So when my grandfather tried to report Hayes, his own loyalty was questioned instead," Rebecca concluded. "Exactly. Rather than risking having his evidence dismissed as an attempt to deflect from his own alleged compromise, he created this elaborate contingency, evidence hidden where it would eventually be found by someone who could vindicate him, but only after sufficient time had passed." "But why wait so long? Why not arrange for this discovery after his death?" Harper's expression grew somber. "Based on what we've pieced together, your grandfather made multiple attempts to guide trusted colleagues to this location after his surveillance ended. Each time, circumstances intervened. The FBI agent he contacted died in a car accident in 1976. The journalist who began investigating Hayes's post-retirement finances abandoned the story when offered a prestigious overseas assignment. Are you suggesting these were not coincidences? Let's just say the pattern raises questions that merit investigation, even decades later," Harper replied carefully. "Soviet intelligence played a long game." Rebecca processed this information, feeling a newfound connection to the grandfather she'd barely known. His architectural brilliance had been matched by moral courage in the face of devastating personal risk. "There's something else you should know," Harper continued. "The lawsuit that destroyed your firm, we've confirmed Viktor Krasny has documented connections to Russian intelligence services. The case against you was engineered specifically to create financial circumstances that would make Willow Creek Barn an attractive option. But why? Rebecca asked, struggling to understand. Why lead me to my grandfather's evidence now, decades after the Cold War ended? Because the Echo network didn't end with the Soviet Union's collapse, Harper said grimly. Several of these facilities were repurposed for modern counterintelligence operations, particularly those targeting Russian capabilities that survived the transition from KGB to their current intelligence services. He spread a map across Rebecca's drafting table. The Montana site was decommissioned, but the structural designs your grandfather created were adapted for next-generation facilities. If certain elements of Russian intelligence discovered that James Morgan had hidden compromising historical evidence, finding it could lead them to technical vulnerabilities in our current systems. So I was maneuvered here as part of a Russian operation to uncover my grandfather's hidden documents, Rebecca said slowly, which they believed might contain information useful for penetrating modern facilities based on his designs. We believe so, yes. Krasny's firm has invested in numerous properties connected to Cold War infrastructure, always through multiple shells and cutouts. Your architectural expertise made you the perfect unwitting asset for evaluating the technical aspects of what you found. Rebecca fell silent, processing the layers of manipulation that had brought her to this moment. Her financial ruin, which had seemed like terrible luck, had been deliberately engineered as part of an intelligence operation targeting her grandfather's hidden legacy. What happens now? She finally asked. We continue as planned, Harper said simply. The renovation provides perfect cover for our security work. Your architectural consultation helps us understand how your grandfather's designs might create vulnerabilities in successor facilities. And most importantly, we use this opportunity to feed carefully crafted misinformation to whoever is monitoring your discovery. You want to use me as a counterintelligence asset, Rebecca stated, not asked. You already are one, Ms. Morgan, from the moment you found that hidden room. The question is whether you'll be an aware participant or an unwitting pawn. Rebecca thought of Emma, happily settled into her new school and already making friends in the rural community. She thought of her architectural career, which had genuine prospects for revival in this region with the grant funding now available. And she thought of her grandfather, who had sacrificed his reputation and potentially his safety to protect American security interests. I want complete transparency moving forward, she said firmly. No more revelations about how I've been manipulated. If I'm going to be involved in counterintelligence operations, I want to know exactly what role I'm playing. Harper nodded, seeming to have expected nothing less. Agreed. Starting now, you'll receive the same operational briefs as our field. Team, with appropriate security compartmentalization. As if to underscore this new arrangement, Brennan entered with a secure tablet displaying surveillance photos. Director, we've confirmed external monitoring of the property. 2 individuals positioned on adjacent land with long-range observation equipment. Their credentials identify them as wildlife researchers, but their equipment appears more suited to human surveillance than animal study. Right on schedule, Harper remarked, unsurprised. Ms. Morgan, it seems your renovation project has attracted exactly the attention we anticipated. Rebecca moved to the studio window, gazing out at the beautiful Montana landscape surrounding her accidental intelligence operation. Somewhere out there, hidden among the rolling hills and scattered pine forests, unknown watchers were monitoring her every move, waiting to see what secrets emerged from the barn her grandfather had selected. As his dead dropped nearly 6 decades earlier, the architectural career she'd fought to build in Chicago had crumbled to dust, only to be reborn in this unlikely setting as something far more complex. Now, her professional skills would serve dual purposes, creating a genuine home and studio, while simultaneously supporting an active counterintelligence operation. "I'll need to revise my renovation plans," she said, turning back to Harper and Brennan. "If we're playing to an audience, we should give them a proper show." Harper's expression held newfound respect. "What do you have in mind?" "Strategic visibility," Rebecca explained, moving to her drafting table. "We modify the renovation to ensure certain activities are clearly visible from the most likely observation points, while others remain completely concealed. My grandfather understood how to design spaces that revealed only what he wanted seen. I inherited that particular skill." As Rebecca began sketching revised plans, she felt a strange sense of rightness, as if her entire career had been preparation for this moment. The disaster that had driven her to this remote Montana property now revealed itself as an opportunity for something she'd never imagined, continuing her grandfather's legacy in ways that transcended architecture alone. The path forward was uncertain and fraught with complexity, but for the first time since her firm's collapse, Rebecca felt the electric thrill of purpose, a challenge worthy of her skills and her courage. Whatever came next, she would face it, not as a victim of circumstance, but as an active participant in her own remarkable story. And somewhere, she liked to think, her grandfather was nodding in approval. 3 weeks into what locals now called the miraculous barn transformation, Rebecca stood on scaffolding 30 feet above the main floor, carefully examining original timber joinery, while a CIA surveillance expert, disguised as her assistant, documented the ceiling structure with a specialized camera. The renovation had proceeded at an astonishing pace, with round-the-clock crews working in shifts to transform both the living quarters and main barn space. What had begun as a desperate last resort was rapidly becoming an architectural showcase and an active counterintelligence operation. "Our friends on the ridge have upgraded their equipment," murmured Thomas, the surveillance expert, referring to the Russian observers maintaining their wildlife researcher cover story. "New telephoto lenses yesterday, FLIR capabilities today. They're getting serious." "Then we should give them something worth watching," Rebecca replied, her confidence growing with each passing day in her unexpected role. The renovation had been strategically designed to create what Director Harper called calculated transparency, allowing the observers to witness certain activities while others remained hidden. Rebecca's architectural expertise proved invaluable in creating spaces that appeared open while concealing critical activities from distant observation points. "Ready for today's performance?" Thomas asked with a slight smile. "Places everyone," Rebecca confirmed, checking her watch. Right on schedule, a truck bearing the logo of a specialized restoration company arrived at the barn. This carefully choreographed delivery would receive maximum attention from the Russian observers, as it contained what appeared to be ground-penetrating radar equipment, ostensibly for checking the structural foundation, but conspicuous enough to suggest the search for additional hidden spaces. What the observers couldn't know was that the real investigation had been completed during the night using much more sophisticated equipment. This daylight delivery was theater, elaborate misdirection designed to focus attention precisely where the counterintelligence team wanted it. Rebecca had discovered she possessed a talent for this work, the ability to design not just physical spaces but layers of perception. Architecture had always been about controlling how people experienced environments. Counterintelligence, she found, operated on remarkably similar principles. As she descended from the scaffolding, Rebecca caught sight of Emma returning from school, chatting animatedly with Agent Meredith Davis. Over the past weeks, her daughter had blossomed in their new environment. The trauma of leaving Chicago had faded, replaced by excitement about their extraordinary home and the movie-like adventure they were experiencing. Rebecca had decided, with Harper's support, to be partially truthful with Emma, Her daughter knew they had discovered something historically important that had belonged to her great-grandfather, and that the government was helping restore the barn because of its historical significance. The surveillance and counterintelligence aspects remained unspoken, though Rebecca suspected her precocious daughter understood more than she let on. "Mom!" Emma called, running across the barn's newly refinished floor. "We're studying the Cold War in history class. I knew all the answers about fallout shelters and secret bunkers." Rebecca exchanged amused glances with Meredith. "Did you now? I wonder how that happened." "I told them my great-grandpa was an architect who built secret government buildings," Emma continued proudly. "Miss Peterson didn't believe me until I showed her the history book you gave me, with his name in it." The history book had been carefully prepared by the CIA's documentation team, a legitimate publication about Cold War architecture, with James Morgan's contributions appropriately noted, but nothing revealing classified information. Its perfectly timed discovery among Rebecca's possessions had been one of many touches designed to build their cover story. After getting Emma settled with homework in their increasingly comfortable living quarters, Rebecca joined the daily briefing in what appeared to be her design studio, but functioned as the operation's secure command center. Michael Brennan led the session, updating the team on developments regarding the investigation into her grandfather's evidence against Colonel Hayes. "We've confirmed Hayes made at least 17 unauthorized disclosures to Soviet contacts between 1962 and 1968. Your grandfather's documentation was accurate and comprehensive. What about the accidents that prevented this evidence from being discovered earlier?" Rebecca asked, still troubled by the implications that her grandfather's attempts to reveal the truth had been deliberately thwarted. Dr. Wright, the Cold War historian, took over. "We've identified strong circumstantial evidence suggesting Soviet intervention. The FBI agent's car accident showed irregularities consistent with vehicle tampering, though the case was closed decades ago. The journalist who abandoned his investigation received his prestigious foreign assignment through a news organization with documented Soviet funding connections." Rebecca felt a wave of vindication on her grandfather's behalf. He wasn't paranoid. They really were undermining his every attempt to expose Hayes. "The sophisticated tradecraft suggests this was a high-priority operation for Moscow," Brennan confirmed, "which makes our current situation even more significant. If Russian intelligence is investing resources to recover this material now, it's because the compromise Hayes initiated continues to have modern relevance." Director Harper arrived midway through the briefing, something that had become increasingly common as the operation's significance escalated. For the head of the CIA to personally oversee a field operation was unprecedented, highlighting the importance of what they were uncovering. "We've identified our wildlife researchers," Harper announced without preamble. "Anatoly Petrov and Sergei Kovalev, both documented SVR officers operating under non-official cover. Their presence confirms Moscow's direct interest in this operation." Rebecca studied the surveillance photos. "They're not trying very hard to stay hidden." "They don't need to," Harper replied. "Their cover as researchers is legally sound, and they're carefully remaining on adjacent public land. More importantly, they want us to know they're watching. It's a psychological tactic designed to pressure you into revealing information in your renovation activities." "Speaking of which," Rebecca said, pulling out her revised architectural plans, "I've incorporated the security team's requests into the next phase. The observatory tower looks like an architectural folly, perfect for a slightly eccentric designer's home studio, but provides excellent sight lines across the entire valley." Harper studied the drawings with approval. "Excellent work. This maintains our cover story while giving us significantly enhanced surveillance capabilities." "There's something else," Rebecca said, hesitating slightly. She'd been debating whether to share her theory, concerned it might seem like overreach. From someone who, despite her grandfather's legacy, remained an architectural consultant rather than an intelligence professional. "Go ahead," Harper encouraged, seeming to sense her reluctance. "I've been studying the coded section at the end of my grandfather's journal, the series of numbers and letters that appeared random. I believe they're architectural coordinates." This caught everyone's attention. The cryptography team had been working on the code without success, trying various intelligence ciphers from the period. Architects use specialized notation systems for precise locations within complex structures, Rebecca explained. "My grandfather developed his own system. I recognized it because he taught it to my father, who later taught it to me. We used a variation of it in my firm for renovation projects." She displayed a diagram on the secure tablet. "If I'm right, these coordinates identify specific structural points within the Echo network facilities, locations where additional evidence might have been hidden." A buzz of excitement filled the room. If Rebecca's theory proved correct, it could dramatically expand the scope of their investigation. "How confident are you in this interpretation?" Harper asked, his tone carefully neutral, but his eyes intense. "Confident enough to start checking the locations here at the Montana facility," Rebecca replied. "Several coordinates appear to reference this site. Others would require access to additional Echo network bunkers." Authorization came swiftly. Within hours, a specialized team was discreetly examining the structural points Rebecca had identified within the underground facility. By midnight, they had their answer. "You were right," Brennan told her, his voice reflecting both admiration and concern as they gathered in the secure room. "We've recovered microfilm caches from 3 of the 5 locations your coordinates indicated. They contain comprehensive documentation of Hayes's espionage activities and something far more disturbing. The recovered microfilm revealed that Hayes hadn't been working alone. He had been part of a sophisticated network of Soviet assets, placed within various U.S. defense and intelligence projects, a network that James Morgan had begun to map through careful observation and analysis. Most concerning were references to a long-term infiltration strategy Russian intelligence called the Inheritors, deep cover assets positioned not for immediate intelligence gathering, but to establish family lines that would place descendants in positions of trust generations later. Your grandfather discovered something far beyond a single compromised official," Dr. Wright explained, her historian's expertise providing crucial context. "He identified a generational strategy designed to outlast the Cold War itself, Russian intelligence playing an extremely long game." Harper's expression was grave. "If this documentation is accurate, some of these inherited positions would be activated now, 50 years later. Children and grandchildren of original assets, raised with carefully constructed identities, positioned near centers of government and military power." The implications were staggering. James Morgan hadn't just uncovered a security breach. He had identified a decade-spanning infiltration strategy whose full implementation would only become apparent long after the Cold War supposedly ended. "This is why Russian intelligence maneuvered me here," Rebecca said, the final pieces falling into place, "not just to find technical vulnerabilities in facilities based on my grandfather's designs, but to locate and suppress his documentation of the Inheritors program before it could expose deep cover assets currently in place." "Precisely," Harper confirmed, "and now we understand why they employed such elaborate means to place you specifically in this position. As James Morgan's granddaughter and a professional architect, you possess the unique combination of familial knowledge and technical expertise to potentially decipher his hidden messages." A chilling thought occurred to Rebecca. "Victor Krasny, the investor who destroyed my firm with that lawsuit, could he be one of these inheritors?" Harper nodded. Grimly, his background shows the classic pattern. Grandfather emigrated from Ukraine in 1962, established a successful import business. Son attended prestigious universities and built financial connections. Grandson Victor positioned at the intersection of international investment and infrastructure development. 3 generations of careful positioning. The revelation left Rebecca momentarily breathless. Her professional destruction hadn't just been collateral damage in an intelligence operation, it had been orchestrated by someone potentially continuing the very infiltration her grandfather had tried to expose. "We need to move quickly," Harper said, his decision immediate. "Ms. Morgan's decryption of the architectural coordinates gives us a critical advantage. But once Petrov and Kovalev realize we're accessing these hidden caches, they'll report to Moscow. We can expect escalation." The team transitioned into rapid response mode, developing a strategy to leverage Rebecca's breakthrough while maintaining their cover operation. Additional security personnel arrived overnight, integrated seamlessly into the renovation crew. Surveillance was enhanced, with particular attention to access routes surrounding the property. Through it all, Rebecca found herself drawing on reserves of resilience she hadn't known she possessed. The architectural problem-solving skills that had built her Chicago career now applied to an infinitely more complex challenge, helping unravel a decades-old intelligence operation while protecting her daughter and rebuilding their lives. The next morning, as dawn broke over the Montana mountains, Rebecca stood at the newly installed glass wall that formed the eastern side of what would become her studio. The renovation had transformed the barn's silhouette, blending historical, agricultural architecture with contemporary design in a way that honored both traditions. Emma joined her, sleepily leaning against her side. "It's starting to look amazing, Mom." "It is, isn't it?" Rebecca agreed, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Very different from what we first saw." "Like us," Emma said with unexpected perception. "We're different too. Before you were always worried. Now you're like a superhero architect spy." Rebecca laughed, but the observation struck home. She had arrived at Willow Creek Barn defeated and desperate, her confidence shattered by professional ruin. Now she stood straighter, moved with purpose, approached challenges with renewed faith in her abilities. "Ms. Morgan," called one of the security team, approaching with a satellite phone. "Director Harper needs to speak with you immediately." The call was brief, but consequential. One of Hayes's documented contacts from the 1960s, a Soviet diplomatic attaché named Yuri Volkov, had been identified entering the United States 3 days earlier. Now, in his 80s, Volkov had officially retired from Russian intelligence decades ago, but his sudden appearance suggested direct Kremlin interest in the situation. "We believe he's being brought in to evaluate our operation and potentially identify what your grandfather may have hidden," Harper explained. "His historical knowledge makes him valuable in ways modern officers can't match." "How does this change our approach?" Rebecca asked, already thinking through architectural adaptations that might be needed for enhanced security. "Acceleration and misdirection," Harper replied. "We're going to create a highly visible discovery event, something our observers can't miss, while simultaneously extracting the remaining evidence your grandfather concealed." The plan came together rapidly. A specialized excavation team would arrive the following day, ostensibly to investigate structural anomalies beneath the barn foundation. Their activities would be conspicuously visible from the Russian observation posts, creating the impression of a major discovery about to happen. Meanwhile, Rebecca would use her grandfather's architectural coordinates to guide a covert team to the remaining evidence caches within the Echo facility, operating literally beneath the feet of the visible excavation team. "We're essentially creating architectural theater," Rebecca explained to Brennan as they finalized details. "The visible structure draws attention, while the real activity happens in spaces deliberately concealed from observation. Using the Russians' expectations against them, Brennan nodded approvingly. They're so focused on what they believe you're about to find that they'll miss what we've already discovered. The next 48 hours unfolded with precision. The excavation team arrived with impressive equipment, setting up under the barn's newly renovated roof. Their ground-penetrating radar scans and core sampling activities created a compelling spectacle of serious investigation. Meanwhile, Rebecca led the covert team through the underground facility, using her grandfather's coordinates to locate the remaining evidence caches. James Morgan had been methodical in his documentation and brilliantly strategic in his hiding places, using his architectural expertise to conceal critical materials within the structural elements of the facility itself. The final cache proved most significant, containing not just historical documentation, but what appeared to be a detailed organizational chart of the Inheritors program, including family trees and projected positions of influence the descendants would eventually hold. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Wright breathed as they examined the recovered materials in the secure room. "Your grandfather created a comprehensive map of Soviet long-term infiltration planning. The intelligence value is incalculable and potentially devastating to Russian operations decades in the making," Harper added, joining them after supervising the visible excavation theater. "Many of these projected positions align with current placements in defense contracting, critical infrastructure and technology sectors." For Rebecca, the discovery brought mixed emotions. Pride in her grandfather's courage and foresight, satisfaction in helping complete the mission he had begun decades before she was born, but also lingering anger at how thoroughly her own life had been manipulated as part of this larger intelligence chess game. "Victor Krasny appears on this chart," she noted, spotting the name of the man whose lawsuit had destroyed her firm. "Third-generation placement targeted for financial leverage operations against strategic infrastructure." "Which explains his interest in architectural firms with government contracts," Harper confirmed. "Your company became a target when you began competing for federal historic renovation projects." The realization brought a strange sense of vindication. Her firm's destruction hadn't been due to any professional failure on her part. It had been a deliberate operation by a Russian asset threatened by her potential access to sensitive renovation projects. That evening, as the visible excavation team packed up their equipment, having discovered nothing of apparent value, much to the likely frustration of the Russian observers, Rebecca found herself alone in what was rapidly becoming a stunning architectural studio. The renovation had transformed the hayloft into a dramatic workspace with soaring ceilings, exposed beams, and glass walls framing the mountain landscape. The irony wasn't lost on her. This extraordinary space, far more inspiring than her sleek Chicago office, had emerged from what had seemed like career-ending disaster. By destroying her firm, Krasny had inadvertently led her to professional renewal and connection with her grandfather's legacy. A gentle knock at the studio door interrupted her reflections. Director Harper entered, looking less like the CIA's top official and more like a weary field operative after days of intense operation. "Our observers are withdrawing," he reported. "The performance worked. They believe we found nothing of significance." "What about Volkov?" "Departed for Washington. This morning, we'll be tracking his movements closely." Harper moved to the architectural plans spread across Rebecca's drafting table, the continuing design for Willow Creek Barn's transformation. "These are remarkable," he said, studying the integration of historical elements with contemporary design. "You've preserved the barn's essential character while creating something entirely new." "That's always been my approach to historical structures," Rebecca replied. Honor what came before while building for the future. Find a balance between preservation and progress. Harper nodded thoughtfully. An apt metaphor for intelligence work as well. We preserve institutional knowledge while adapting to emerging threats. The players change, but the fundamental patterns endure, as your grandfather understood all too well. He turned to face her directly. Which brings me to a proposition. The operational phase of this investigation is concluding, but the intelligence implications will continue unfolding for months, possibly years. The Inheritors program represents a counterintelligence challenge requiring both historical perspective and forward-thinking analysis. You're not suggesting I continue as some kind of intelligence consultant, Rebecca said, surprised. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Your unique combination of architectural expertise and family connection to this case has proven invaluable. More importantly, you've demonstrated aptitude for the conceptual aspects of counterintelligence work, seeing patterns, anticipating adversary actions, designing multi-layered operations. The proposition was unexpected, but not entirely shocking. Rebecca had found herself increasingly engaged in the strategic aspects of the operation, offering insights that extended beyond her architectural expertise. I have a design practice. To rebuild, she said, gesturing to the studio taking shape around them. And Emma needs stability after everything we've been through. The consulting role would be discreet, part-time, and compatible with your professional work, Harper assured her. In fact, the network of historical renovation projects we could connect you with would significantly accelerate your practice's rebuilding. As for stability, I'd argue that understanding the true nature of the forces that disrupted your lives offers more security than remaining unaware. Rebecca moved to the glass wall, gazing out at the Montana landscape, now bathed in evening light. The transformation of Willow Creek Barn mirrored her own journey, from abandoned ruin to renewed purpose, from desperation to determination. Her grandfather had faced a similar choice decades earlier, recognizing a threat, accepting the responsibility to address it, creating a legacy that extended far beyond his architectural achievements. Now that legacy had found its way to her, not through family stories or inherited blueprints, but through an extraordinary convergence of professional expertise and historical circumstance. I'll need complete transparency, she said finally, turning back to Harper. No compartmentalization or need-to-know limitations on anything involving the Inheritors program. If I'm consulting on this, I want the full picture. Agreed. Harper replied without hesitation. Your security clearance is already being processed. By next week, you'll have access to the complete analytical framework being built around your grandfather's discovery. As Harper departed, Rebecca remained in her studio, watching night settle over the mountains. What had begun as a desperate gamble on a dilapidated barn had evolved into something she could never have imagined. Professional renewal, connection with her family legacy, and a role in addressing threats to national security that spanned generations. The path forward was complex and would require careful balance between her architectural practice and intelligence consulting, between Emma's needs and her new responsibilities, between the visible renovation project and the invisible counterintelligence operation it had revealed. Yet for the first time since leaving Chicago, Rebecca felt genuinely optimistic about the future. The skills that had built her career hadn't failed her. They had prepared her for challenges beyond anything she had previously imagined. The disaster that had seemed to end her professional journey had instead redirected it toward greater purpose. From the ashes of defeat, something remarkable had emerged, not just a renovated barn, but a renewed sense of possibility and purpose. Like her grandfather before her, Rebecca Morgan had discovered that true architecture extended beyond physical structures to the building of legacy, security, and truth that could stand the test of time. 6 months after discovering the hidden room behind the false wall, Rebecca Morgan stood in the center of her completed architectural studio, watching the Montana sunset paint the mountains in hues of amber and gold. Willow Creek Barn had undergone a metamorphosis so profound that visitors struggled to reconcile before and after photographs. The weathered agricultural structure had been transformed into an architectural showcase that harmonized historical preservation with contemporary design. Soaring timber beams now framed walls of glass. The former hayloft had become a dramatic mezzanine studio overlooking the main living space. The dilapidated silo had been converted into a striking cylindrical library with spiral stairs winding to a rooftop observation deck that locals called the Lighthouse. More remarkably, Rebecca herself had undergone an equally dramatic transformation, from a bankrupted architect fleeing professional ruin to a rising star in historical renovation with a portfolio of prestigious projects across the Mountain West, and a waiting list of clients eager to experience her unique vision. "Quite a change from that first day, isn't it?" observed Michael Brennan, who had remained as her primary liaison with the intelligence community after the operation's active phase concluded. "In every possible way," Rebecca agreed, thinking not just of the physical renovation, but of her own evolution. "When Emma and I pulled up that first day, I couldn't imagine how we'd make this place merely habitable, let alone extraordinary." "Speaking of extraordinary," Brennan said, "Director Harper is impressed with your analysis of the architectural vulnerabilities in the Denver Federal Complex. Your grandfather would be proud. You've got his eye for the subtle details that others miss." Rebecca's consulting role with the intelligence community had evolved alongside her revitalized architectural practice. As Harper had predicted, her unique combination of technical expertise and intuitive understanding of how spaces could be compromised had proven invaluable in the ongoing investigation of the Inheritors program. "How many arrests are we at now?" she asked, referring to the Russian deep-cover agents identified through her grandfather's documentation. 17 confirmed operations disrupted," Brennan replied. "Some arrested, others quietly removed from sensitive positions. A few turned to provide counterintelligence. Victor Krasny is among those facing prosecution. The evidence connecting him to your firm's sabotage was particularly compelling." The vindication of seeing Krasny held accountable had been unexpectedly powerful for Rebecca. The man who had deliberately destroyed her Chicago practice now faced serious federal charges, while she had risen from those ashes to create something far more significant than her previous firm. The sound of tires on gravel announced Emma's return from her after-school science club. Rebecca watched through the studio windows as her daughter bounded from the car, her backpack bouncing against her shoulder, her movements energized by the confidence that had blossomed over these transformative months. "Mom!" Emma called as she burst into the studio. "We got selected! Our environmental monitoring project for Paradise Valley is one of 10 finalists in the national competition." Rebecca hugged her daughter, marveling at how thoroughly Emma had adapted to their new life. The shy, uncertain child who had arrived in Montana, hiding behind stuffed animals, had grown into a vibrant 10-year-old who led her science team and explored the countryside with fearless curiosity. "That's incredible, honey. I knew all those water samples and wildlife observations would pay off. Ms. Peterson says we might even get to present in Washington, D.C. Emma continued excitedly. "She says our data on watershed changes is really important for climate research." As Emma headed to the kitchen for her customary post-school snack, Brennan smiled. "She's thriving here. Hard to believe she's the same child who arrived 6 months ago. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel secure, Rebecca noted. Emma senses that we've found our footing, that we're not just surviving anymore, but building something meaningful. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine Reynolds, the legal counsel who had first presented Rebecca with the unusual agreement that had transformed their lives. "The paperwork is complete," Reynolds announced without preamble, placing a leather portfolio on Rebecca's drafting table. "The Willow Creek property has been officially transferred to the Morgan Family Trust, with all security clearances and access protocols updated accordingly." The legal maneuver represented the final step in Rebecca's transition from accidental participant to authorized partner in the ongoing counterintelligence operation. The property that had once been a desperate last resort was now a formally designated secure facility with Rebecca as both owner and authorized custodian. "There's something else," Reynolds added, extracting a sealed envelope from her briefcase. "This came through diplomatic channels yesterday. Director Harper felt you should receive it personally." The envelope bore official Russian government seals and was addressed simply to the architect, Willow Creek. Inside, Rebecca found a handwritten letter in elegant Cyrillic script, accompanied by an English translation. "To the granddaughter of James Morgan, I write in the twilight of my years to acknowledge a worthy adversary across generations. Your grandfather was a man of remarkable perception and principle. What took decades for others to recognize, he saw immediately. What many lacked courage to confront, he documented at great personal risk. The game between our nations continues with new players, but old soldiers like myself recognize when a decisive move has been made. The operation your grandfather set in motion and you completed has undone decades of patient work. For this, I offer not congratulations, but professional respect. The architect sees what others cannot, the fundamental structures beneath surface appearances, the load-bearing truths that support or undermine the visible edifice. James Morgan saw clearly. So, it appears, does his granddaughter. With reluctant admiration, Yuri Volkov, retired, former director at S, first chief director at KGB, Rebecca read the letter twice, struck by its strange combination of concession and defiance. "Is this authentic?" Reynolds nodded. "Volkov returned to Moscow 3 months ago. This was sent through official channels. He wanted us to know it came from him. According to our analysts, it's a traditional gesture among old-school intelligence professionals, acknowledging defeat in one operation while signaling the larger contest continues." After Reynolds departed, Brennan stayed to brief Rebecca on security upgrades planned for the property, maintaining the cover story of continued renovation while actually enhancing the facility's capabilities as a monitoring station for suspicious activities in the region. "There's growing interest in using this location as a training facility," Brennan mentioned casually. "The combination of remote location, unusual architecture, and your expertise creates unique opportunities for teaching certain specialized skills." "You want to bring intelligence trainees here?" Rebecca asked, surprised by this new direction. "Not full classes, small groups, specialized instruction in architectural security and counterintelligence techniques. Your perspective as both an architect and someone who's experienced a hostile intelligence operation firsthand offers insights traditional instructors can't provide." The proposition was unexpected but intriguing. Rebecca had discovered she enjoyed the analytical aspects of intelligence work, particularly when they intersected with her architectural expertise. The opportunity to share those insights with others appealed to her innate teacher's instinct. "I'd want to structure it around legitimate architectural workshops," she stipulated. "Maintain the cover of professional development for historical preservation specialists while incorporating the security elements." Exactly what we had in mind, Brennan confirmed. Legitimate architectural education on the surface, specialized intelligence training beneath, just like this facility itself. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Rebecca sat in the converted silo library, surrounded by books on architectural history, structural engineering, and, discreetly shelved among them, volumes on intelligence operations and counterintelligence. History provided by Harper's team. She opened her grandfather's journal, now returned to her possession after exhaustive analysis by intelligence experts. The familiar handwriting connected her to a man she'd barely known, but whose legacy had fundamentally altered the course of her life. A knock at the library door announced an unexpected visitor. Director Harper himself stood in the doorway, having apparently arrived while she was getting Emma settled for the night. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "I was in Helena for a classified briefing and thought I'd deliver this personally, rather than sending it through channels." He handed her a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth with age. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay a silver pocket watch. Opening it revealed an inscription. "To James Morgan, with gratitude for services rendered beyond duty's call. W.C. It belonged to your grandfather," Harper explained. "We found it in sealed CIA archives, held since his death, but never delivered to his family due to classification concerns. The inscription is from William Colby, former director of Central Intelligence. Your grandfather was apparently held in higher esteem than even our historical records indicated." Rebecca cradled the timepiece, feeling a tangible connection to her grandfather's legacy. Why wasn't this acknowledgement made public after the Cold War ended? Why maintain the secrecy around his contributions? "Operational security," Harper replied, taking a seat across from her. "Even after the Soviet Union collapsed, revealing the full extent of your grandfather's counterintelligence work risked exposing methods and sources that remained relevant. More importantly, it might have alerted the inheritors that their network had been compromised decades earlier." He gestured toward the renovated barn surrounding them. "Sometimes the most important architectural elements are those that remain unseen. The foundation, the structural supports, the systems that maintain integrity through storms. Your grandfather created an invisible framework of security that supported visible institutions. Recognition would have compromised that very framework." The metaphor resonated with Rebecca's architectural sensibility. The most critical elements of any structure were often those hidden from view, the careful engineering that allowed the visible beauty to exist safely and securely. "There's something else you should know," Harper continued. "The lawsuit that destroyed your firm wasn't Krasny's first attempt to neutralize you. Your professional trajectory had been tracked for years, with multiple subtle interventions designed to keep you from government contracts that might have exposed you to classified facilities." "What kind of interventions?" Rebecca asked, unsettled. By this revelation, project bids mysteriously lost, potential clients steered toward competitors, regulatory complications that others didn't face. Subtle but effective measures to contain your professional reach without triggering suspicion. Rebecca absorbed this information with growing indignation. So my entire career was being manipulated, every setback engineered. "Not every setback," Harper clarified, "but your success was being carefully managed, contained within parameters that wouldn't intersect with sensitive government projects where your grandfather's influence might be recognized or your inherited aptitudes might raise concerns." The implications were staggering. Her professional journey, the achievements she'd worked so hard for, the obstacles she'd struggled against, had been partly shaped by invisible hands seeking to control her potential threat to long-buried secrets. When you began competing for historical federal renovation projects despite these measures, more direct intervention became necessary, Harper continued. Hence Krasny's lawsuit, a calculated move to eliminate your firm entirely when containment proved insufficient. Rebecca stood, moving to the curved window that offered a view of moonlight across the Montana landscape. So my professional destruction wasn't just collateral damage in an operation to bring me here. It was the culmination of years of active suppression. Yes, Harper acknowledged simply, which makes what you've built here all the more remarkable. You were targeted by sophisticated operators with significant resources, yet you've emerged stronger than before. That resilience is precisely why your grandfather's legacy found its way to you. As Harper departed, leaving Rebecca with her grandfather's watch and these revelations, she remained in the silo library, processing the true scope of what had transpired. The manipulation of her career hadn't begun with Krasny's lawsuit. It had been ongoing for years, an invisible current shaping the river of her professional life. Yet somehow, that knowledge didn't diminish her achievements, but magnified them. She had succeeded despite systematic opposition from sophisticated adversaries. Every design award, every satisfied client, every innovative solution had been accomplished while swimming against a current specifically designed to limit her potential. The watch ticked softly in her palm, its mechanism still functioning after decades, much like her grandfather's carefully laid plans. He had created a legacy that transcended architectural drawings and government facilities, a blueprint for integrity that had spanned generations to reach her at precisely the moment when she could continue his work. The next morning brought clear skies and the arrival of Rebecca's first architectural clients since establishing her new practice in Montana. A historical preservation society seeking to renovate a 19th-century mining town administration building into a community center. Legitimate work that would establish her regional reputation while providing cover for her continuing intelligence consulting. As she conducted the site tour, Rebecca found herself seeing the historical structure through dual lenses: the architect's eye for restoration potential and the security consultant's awareness of vulnerabilities and opportunities. The perspectives didn't conflict but complemented each other, creating a richer understanding of how spaces functioned on multiple levels. Your proposal captures exactly what we've been trying to articulate, the Preservation Society director enthused after reviewing Rebecca's preliminary designs. Honoring the historical significance while creating functionality for contemporary needs. Where did you develop this approach? It's about listening to what the structure wants to become, Rebecca explained, finding words for an intuitive process. Every building has integrity, architectural, historical, functional. The key is identifying that core integrity and building from it, rather than imposing something foreign. The philosophy applied equally to her intelligence work, she realized. Identifying core patterns, respecting historical continuity, building new capabilities that honored original purposes while adapting to modern challenges, these principles transcended individual disciplines. Returning to Willow Creek Barn that afternoon, Rebecca found Emma and 3 friends constructing an elaborate model watershed system in the barn's spacious main room, part of their science competition project. The sight of her daughter confidently directing the team, explaining hydrological concepts with enthusiasm, reinforced how profoundly their lives had transformed. We're mapping how agricultural runoff affects the watershed, Emma explained, showing Rebecca their detailed scale model. See how we've included the historical changes. This shows farming patterns from the 1930s when this barn was built, and this shows current usage. We're demonstrating how land use changes affect water quality over generations. The parallels to Rebecca's own work, both architectural and intelligence-related, were striking. Emma had intuitively grasped the importance of historical patterns in understanding current conditions, the way past decisions created frameworks that shaped present realities. Later that evening, as Rebecca worked in her studio on designs for both the Mining Town project and a classified analysis of security vulnerabilities in historical government buildings, she received an unexpected video call from Director Harper. "We've made a significant breakthrough," he announced without preamble. "The remaining inheritors' assets are being systematically identified and contained. Your architectural analysis of facility access patterns proved crucial. You identified vulnerability clusters that had escaped our conventional security reviews." The professional validation was gratifying, but Rebecca found herself more focused on the personal implications. "What does this mean for Emma and me? Is the active threat diminished?" "Substantially," Harper confirmed. "While routine security protocols will remain appropriate, the targeted operation against you has been effectively neutralized. The assets specifically tasked with monitoring your activities have been identified and contained." The news brought a sense of closure to the extraordinary chapter that had begun with their desperate arrival 6 months earlier. The immediate danger had passed, though Rebecca knew the broader intelligence landscape remained complex and dynamic. "There's something else," Harper continued. "The Historical Commission overseeing federal architectural preservation projects has an opening for a special consultant. The position would provide access to significant renovation opportunities while maintaining your security clearance for ongoing consultation work. If you're interested, the appointment could be formalized next month." The opportunity represented everything Rebecca had hoped to rebuild after her Chicago firm's destruction: prestigious projects, professional recognition, financial stability, combined with the meaningful security work that had become an unexpected dimension of her architectural practice. "I'd like that," she said simply. "Thank you." After concluding the call, Rebecca walked through the renovated barn, marveling at the transformation. Where sagging timbers had threatened collapse, structural reinforcements now ensured stability for another century. Where drafty gaps had let in bitter Montana winds, energy-efficient glass now captured breathtaking views while maintaining comfort. Where desperation had driven their arrival, purpose now defined their presence. In the main living area, Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, surrounded by her science project notes, her face peaceful in the soft lighting. Rebecca covered her with a blanket, overwhelmed with gratitude for her daughter's resilience and adaptation to their extraordinary circumstances. Moving to the silo library, Rebecca retrieved her grandfather's pocket watch from its box. Feeling its solid weight in her palm, the timepiece had witnessed decades of history, ticking steadily through Cold War tensions, family generations, and the hidden currents of intelligence operations that had ultimately connected her to her grandfather's legacy. On impulse, she climbed the spiral stairs to the observation deck atop the converted silo. The night air carried the crisp scent of pine and distant snow from the mountain peaks. Stars blazed across the Montana sky with an intensity impossible in Chicago, creating a celestial dome above the renovated barn that now stood as both home and headquarters for their remarkable new life. 6 months ago, Rebecca Morgan had arrived at Willow Creek Barn, a broken professional at the end of her resources, desperately seeking merely shelter and survival. Now she stood atop a structure that embodied transformation, architectural, professional, and deeply personal. The false wall that had concealed her grandfather's hidden room had been just the first of many revelations, each uncovering new dimensions of possibility and purpose. The disaster that had driven her from Chicago had not been an ending, but a redirection towards something far more significant than she could have imagined. As an architect, Rebecca had always understood that buildings were more than mere structures. They were expressions of human aspiration, containers for dreams and possibilities, physical manifestations of how we choose to live and work. Now that understanding had expanded to include how spaces could protect, reveal, conceal, and inspire on levels beyond conventional architecture. From the desperate gamble on a dilapidated barn had emerged a masterwork of renovation that embodied the very essence of transformation, honoring historical foundations while creating vibrant new possibilities. The professional skills that had seemed insufficient in Chicago had proven perfectly suited to the complex challenges of Montana, both architectural and otherwise. The pocket watch ticked steadily in her hand, its mechanism still functioning, precisely after decades, a testament to craftsmanship designed to endure. In a similar way, her grandfather's legacy had survived attempts to suppress it, finding its way across generations to continue its purpose. The revelation that her career had been systematically manipulated now seemed less a violation and more a testament to her inherent capabilities. She had been considered significant enough to require containment, her potential recognized even by those who sought to limit it. As the Montana night enfolded Willow Creek Barn in its vast silence, Rebecca felt a profound sense of alignment with her grandfather's legacy, with her own evolved purpose, with the architectural principles that had guided her from the beginning. The structures that endured, both physical and metaphorical, were those built on integrity, adaptability, and clear-eyed recognition of fundamental truths. She had arrived 6 months ago, seeking merely to survive after professional catastrophe. Now she stood as not just a successful architect, but as a guardian of security that transcended buildings, a protector of institutions and principles that formed the foundation of something larger than individual structures. The barn below her feet, once leaning toward collapse, now stood as a testament to the possibility of renewal, not just of buildings, but of lives and legacies. The hidden room that had once contained secrets now opened doors to new possibilities. The intelligence operation that had initially manipulated her had ultimately liberated her to greater purpose. Rebecca Morgan had come to Montana looking for a last resort and found instead a first beginning, a renewal of professional purpose, a connection to family legacy, and a path forward that integrated all her skills and experiences into meaningful work that would endure. As she descended from the observation deck to return to the warm heart of their transformed home, Rebecca carried with her not just her grandfather's watch, but the certainty that some renovations extend beyond physical structures to the very architecture of lives and legacies. From behind the false wall had emerged not just hidden rooms and classified documents, but a blueprint for resilience that would guide their future long after the immediate operation concluded. What had begun as a desperate gamble had become their greatest opportunity, a transformation as profound as the barn itself and equally designed to weather whatever storms might come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.